Las Vegas, 1974. Elvis paused mid-song, his band frozen behind him. A young man in the crowd clutched a cardboard sign, "Let me sing with you." The king didn't laugh. He pointed straight at him. "If you love moments where music becomes pure human magic, stay with us." Stories like this remind us why Elvis wasn't just a star, he was a legend. The house lights were dim, but the Hilton showroom in Las Vegas pulsed with electricity. It was 1974, a year when Elvis still held the Strip in his grip. The band was tight, the horns sharp, and his white jumpsuit shimmered beneath the golden stage lamps. Then it happened, in the middle of a verse. Elvis lowered his mic. His left hand shot up, signaling the band to stop. Guitars hung silent, drums froze mid-beat. The sudden quiet was so complete that the faint hiss of the amplifiers became the loudest sound in the room. At first, people thought it was a mistake. A missed cue, a tech failure. Nervous laughter bubbled from the back rows. But then the spotlight shifted, sweeping slowly across the crowd until it caught something unusual near the front. A young man, ordinary suit wrinkled at the shoulders. In his hands, a cardboard sign, scrawled in thick black marker, "Let me sing with you." The room reacted with a mixture of gasps and whispers. Who brings a sign like that to an Elvis Presley show? Ushers began to move, already preparing to escort him out. But Elvis raised a finger, halting them in their tracks. Witnesses say the hush that followed was eerie. You could hear the rustle of programs, the clink of ice in a glass, even the squeak of a chair shifting on the carpet. The audience leaned forward as one, thousands of breaths held in suspense. Elvis's eyes never left the young man. He tilted his head, studying him like a puzzle. The spotlight, now steady, lit the man's nervous face pale, sweating but determined. His lips moved silently, as if repeating a prayer. Then Elvis did something that broke every expectation. He smiled. It wasn't a mocking grin. It was small, genuine, almost curious. He took 2 steps toward the edge of the stage, the rhinestones on his sleeve catching the light with every movement. Security hesitated, waiting for a signal. And that's when Elvis waved them back. The crowd erupted, half in disbelief, half in excitement. Applause began to ripple through the hall, confused but growing louder. Something extraordinary was about to happen, though no one yet knew what. Elvis turned back toward the band, gave a quick shake of his head, then faced the young man again. He extended one hand, fingers outstretched, inviting him forward. The spotlight widened. Bridging the space between them, the stranger clutched his sign tighter, his legs trembling as he stood. For a second, he didn't move, frozen under the weight of the moment. Then, urged on by a swell of cheers, he began to shuffle toward the stage. Eyes followed him. Some faces showed awe, others disbelief. A few smirked, convinced this would end in embarrassment. But no one looked away as he reached the steps. Elvis's hand remained steady, waiting. The king had broken the barrier, and what happened next would leave the audience. Talking for decades, the stranger's shoes clicked faintly against the stage steps. Every sound was magnified in the silence. The cardboard sign, now folded under his arm, trembled with each movement. When he reached the top, Elvis extended his hand. The young man hesitated, then gripped it. Witnesses later said the handshake lasted longer than expected, firm, almost fatherly. The rhinestones of Elvis's sleeve brushed against the man's plain suit. The contrast striking. One, the king of Las Vegas. the other an anonymous fan who had dared to ask. The crowd buzzed, torn between disbelief and curiosity. The Hilton showroom had seen countless stars walk its stage, but never a complete unknown pulled from the audience. A murmur spread through the rows. Who is he? What's happening? Elvis didn't rush. He let the moment breathe. With a small motion, he guided the man toward the center of the stage. Stagehands shifted uneasily near the curtains. The band members exchanged glances, their instruments poised but silent. No one knew what would happen next. Then Elvis spoke, his voice steady but playful. He wants to sing for you all tonight. The audience erupted. Applause thundered through the room, mixed with laughter and shouts. Some clapped in encouragement, others in disbelief, but the energy was undeniable. The unknown singer blinked in the flood of lights, his eyes wide, his breath uneven. Elvis leaned closer, his mic lowered at his side. Witnesses recall him whispering, "Take your time. Don't be nervous." The young man nodded quickly, his Adam's apple rising and falling with a swallow. The spotlight shifted to isolate him, leaving Elvis a half step behind, a towering presence just outside the center beam. The plain suit now glowed under the lights, though sweat stains were already darkening the fabric. For a moment, he froze. The crowd sensed it, some even chuckled softly. The tension hung sharp in the air, balanced between triumph and disaster. Elvis gave a reassuring nod, folding his arms as if to say, "It's your stage." The stranger raised his chin. He adjusted the microphone stand with a shaky hand. The steel groaned slightly under his grip. He inhaled deeply, lips parting, and then nothing. Just a ragged breath that caught in his throat. Laughter trickled from the back rows. The tension threatened to tip into humiliation. Ushers shifted, waiting for Elvis to step in, but Elvis didn't move. Instead, he clapped once. A crisp, steady sound. He mouthed again, "Take your time." The young man closed his eyes, drew in another breath. This time, when he opened his mouth, a note came out. Not perfect. A little raw, a little cracked, but real. The sound carried across the room, surprising even himself. The laughter stopped. The audience hushed again, leaning forward as if drawn by invisible strings. Elvis tilted his head, listening intently. He gave a half smile and clapped a rhythm. The drummer tapped a stick against the rim. The bassist followed with a low hum. The band, still hesitant, began to form the skeleton of a blues riff. The stranger's voice steadied, rising above the music. It wasn't polished, but it was soulful, honest, and just as the crowd began to realize something was happening here, Elvis stepped closer, his voice ready to join. The microphone felt heavier with every second. The young man gripped it tighter, knuckles whitening under the glare of the spotlight. A faint hiss from the amp echoed across the showroom, mingling with the rustle of programs in the audience's hands. Every eye was fixed, every breath suspended. He cleared his throat. The first note cracked, a fragile sound trembling across the room. A few hesitant chuckles echoed from the balcony, but Elvis's nod encouraged him to continue. "Take your time," the king mouthed again, a private mantra the audience could only imagine. The second note held, warmer this time, the rough edges smoothing as he found his rhythm. A single spotlight dusted with gold caught the sweat glinting on his brow. The smell of stage polish mixed with the faint perfume of the audience, creating a cocktail of anticipation. Elvis stepped closer, his white jumpsuit shimmering under the lights. He hummed along, subtle harmonies that guided the stranger without overpowering him. The drummer tapped a soft shuffle, the bass vibrating through the floorboards, joining the delicate moment with the heartbeat of the band. By the first chorus, disbelief transformed into awe. Witnesses would later say the hush was absolute, like a collective inhalation held and released only at the right moment. Some leaned forward, gripping railings. Others closed their eyes, letting the sound sink into memory. Every note the young man sang seemed to stretch the room, filling corners that had never been touched before. Elvis's voice entered, low and rich, weaving seamlessly with the unpolished, raw timbre of the newcomer. The contrast was electrifying. Where the young man's voice cracked with emotion, Elvis's carried control and warmth. The blend created a tension that pulled at hearts, a narrative in song itself. A fan in the second row later recalled smelling the faint scent of Elvis's cologne as he leaned forward, watching intently. Another noticed a microphone stand trembling under the singer's grip, tiny vibrations synced with every word. The crowd didn't just hear the performance, they felt it. Midway through the verse, the stranger's confidence surged. He bent into the mic, eyes closed, body swaying. His voice gained volume, clarity, and power. The previous fear had dissolved, replaced by a raw, earnest expression. The audience responded in waves of murmured encouragement. Some even whispered the lyrics, caught in the intimacy of the moment. Elvis clapped the beat on his knees, then joined in full, harmonizing softly. Each movement was deliberate, supportive, an unspoken lesson in artistry. A subtle nod from him, a tilt of the head, small cues that guided without overshadowing, and then a pause. The young man hesitated at a high note, uncertain. A silence that felt like eternity, broken only by the faint hiss of the amp. The audience held its collective breath. Elvis leaned closer again, whispering something only the cameras could catch. "You've got this." The words acted as a lifeline. The note sailed, pure and true, resonating through the room. The hush broke into a ripple of awe, applause threatening at the edges, not yet fully released. And just as the stranger exhaled in relief, a flashbulb popped at the edge of the stage. Cameras had captured the moment. Witnesses frozen in the instant before history crystallized. A hush fell again as Elvis stepped fully into the young man's space, letting his presence fill the stage without pressure. The band waited, breath held in sync. With the audience, the first few bars were soft, almost a whisper, but then the magic unfolded. Their voices met, Elvis's smooth, commanding, golden tone weaving round the raw, earnest timbre of the stranger. The crowd swayed instinctively. Ushers froze mid-step, drinks paused in mid-air. Every eye followed the two men as if watching an impossible conversation in song. The spotlight tracked them, dust motes suspended in its beam like tiny stars marking this celestial moment. The young man glanced up once, catching Elvis's gaze, a brief spark of approval. Unspoken but absolute, Elvis let him take the next verse alone. It was a daring choice. One misstep, and the spell could shatter. But the man rose to it. His voice grew in confidence, nuanced and expressive, carrying every word with trembling emotion. Some say you could feel the audience lean closer, physically drawn into his story. The band followed, subtle brushes on drums, piano chords gentle as if afraid to intrude. Midway, Elvis stepped closer, draping one of his scarves around the man's neck. A symbolic gesture, tiny yet monumental. Cameras flashed, capturing a moment that would later be etched into fan memory. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was a blessing, a passing of confidence from legend to unknown. The young man's eyes glistened, voice catching at the vulnerability and wonder of it all. The chorus built, their voices blending in a wave of harmony. Elvis softened his control, bending to the rawness beside him, letting the man shine. The audience erupted in quiet awe, some clutching hands to their chests, others whispering prayers of joy. Every note was a dialogue of emotion to souls communicating across years of experience and promise. Suddenly, a minor mistake in the young man's phrasing threatened the rhythm. A flicker of panic passed his eyes, but Elvis responded instinctively, harmonizing in a way that covered and lifted him. The correction was invisible to most, but anyone paying attention felt it. Mastery and generosity in a single breath. The duet built to a crescendo. Elvis leaned into a final, sustained note while the stranger mirrored him, raw and unbroken. The audience rose instinctively, waves of applause and cheers crashing through the showroom. Some spectators reportedly cried openly. Others whispered to companions, unable to speak. The moment was a delicate balance of triumph, vulnerability, and pure artistry. As the final note rang out, the spotlight froze them in luminous gold. Hands rested on microphones, eyes locked in silent acknowledgement. The applause grew into a roar, carrying the duet beyond the stage, into memory itself. Cameras clicked furiously, fans pressed against barriers, all desperate to hold onto a fragment of this unparalleled night. And just as the young man exhaled, the crowd surged, ready to cheer. But Elvis held up a hand, letting the applause swell and build, prolonging the emotional high, ensuring the stranger felt the full weight of the moment. The final note lingered, vibrating through the Hilton showroom like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Then the audience erupted, a wave of applause, cheers, and shouts that bounced off the chandeliers and gilded walls. Some fans cried openly, tears streaking makeup and beards alike. Others clutched each other's hands, whispering, "Did you see that?" The air smelled faintly of perfume, whiskey, and the lingering heat of spotlights, a sensory memory branded into the night. Elvis stepped toward the young man, enveloping him in a brief, genuine embrace. Witnesses say the king whispered something faint, carried only by the stage mics. Never stopped singing. The words were simple, but weighty, a lifetime condensed into a single moment. Security, trained for chaos, moved in reflexively, but Elvis waved them back, ensuring the stranger could bow, hear applause, and feel the crowd's collective heartbeat. The young man descended the steps slowly, absorbing every eye on him. Each step echoed softly on the polished floor. Fans craned forward, desperate to catch a glance. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing fleeting angles of disbelief and exhilaration. Backstage, murmurs spread like wildfire. Who is he? Was this planned? Elvis never does this. The question hung in the air, unanswered, adding layers of intrigue that would circulate in fan circles for decades. Some say the man's shaking hand brushed against the velvet rope as he walked down the aisle. He hadn't fully processed the enormity of what had just occurred, from unknown audience member to co-star on the stage with a legend. The crowd's applause followed him to the exits, a sonic ribbon of affirmation stretching through the entire venue. Ushers reported goosebumps running up their arms, a sensation rarely felt during routine shows. And yet, the night wasn't over. whispers carried through hotel corridors, backstage lounges, and press rooms. This wasn't merely a performance. It was a story, a memory etched in collective consciousness. Witnesses recall that even some hardened roadies, usually unmoved by fan antics, were wiping tears or smiling at the sheer audacity of Elvis's gesture. Every person in that room, from front row enthusiasts to distant balcony seats, had become part of an intimate, once-in-a-lifetime moment. The open loop remained. Who was this unknown singer? How did Elvis choose him? Would anyone ever hear him again? Fans would replay stories for years, sharing their own eyewitness accounts, building a mystique around one night when spontaneity and generosity eclipsed rehearsal and routine. Backstage, the man collapsed into a chair for a breath, adrenaline still thrumming. Elvis, still on stage, gave a final nod to the band, signaling that life on the Strip would resume tomorrow. But this night belonged entirely to a stranger and a king. 3 days later, according to reports, a package arrived at the young man's modest apartment. Inside lay a guitar, polished and gleaming even under fluorescent kitchen lights, and atop it a handwritten note in crisp, unmistakable handwriting, to the voice I'll never forget. Keep singing. Elvis. Some say the man held it for hours, fingers tracing the letters, unable to speak. Others recall that a single tear fell onto the fretboard, leaving a small, glinting mark. The story spread quickly through fan networks, passed along in whispered conversations, hotel lobbies, and diner booths. This wasn't merely a token, it was a symbol of recognition from one of the most iconic performers in history. Witnesses recall that collectors and historians alike considered it a legendary gesture, proof that Elvis's instinct for generosity extended far beyond the stage. The unknown singer never became a household name, and yet, for one night, he stood in history's brightest light. According to reports, he played the guitar for friends and family, his voice now carrying a confidence born from a single, extraordinary evening. The hotel's staff, longtime fans, and even band members would later recount the magic of that night as if it were yesterday, a night when spontaneity, courage, and the sheer generosity of a star collided perfectly. Elvis's legacy is layered in moments like this, rehearsed, human, unforgettable. He didn't just perform. He elevated strangers, creating memories that outlasted glittering costumes and chart-topping hits. For fans, the story became a symbol. Greatness isn't measured only in fame, but in the moments you give others permission to shine. The twist, the gift, the note. The story shared for decades cemented that night as more than a performance. It became proof of an ethos, an instinct to see talent and humanity wherever it emerged. The unknown singer's life may not have been filled with arenas, contracts, or worldwide tours, but one night, he experienced something far rarer, being seen fully in front of thousands, by the king himself. Moral and reflection, one act of recognition can ripple through time, touching more lives than anyone could imagine. That night in Las Vegas, Elvis didn't just perform. He created history, generosity, and hope all at once. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes a single act of kindness can make history. And tell us, if you had one chance on stage with Elvis, what song would you sing?